This was a great intro and also transition to our first panel discussion. I would like to get the speakers on stage. Oak from Olas, Morgan from Hopscotch, Avaer from Upstreet, Lex from Generative Ventures, and Ethan from MyShell, please. Perfect. Take a seat.
It's very intimate.
This is actually my seat, Ethan.
Yeah.
Ethan. So yeah, I need to run. And while we're getting set up here, to do a little temperature check here in the room, who of you guys is actually already building with AI? Cool. I guess, yeah, most of you are here. Who of you is a bit pessimistic about AI or the adoption of AI in crypto? Cool. Okay, so we don't get into deep discussions today. We mainly agree on everything that we will discuss. Okay. So yeah, the panel or the topic of the panel is can autonomous AI agents become crypto's largest user base? We are almost at the end of East Denver, and I think after this week we are pretty confident that East Denver was more AI Denver, right? And that AI will become crypto's largest user base. At least it's a big use case that's coming in the next weeks and months. And actually, David, you asked a lot of these questions that we will discuss on this first panel here today. How can actually AI and crypto interact? And I would like to start with a overall opening question. Why do we actually need AI in crypto? Why is it so powerful for crypto adoption? Morgan, this is actually the first question to you.
Sure. Yeah, can everyone hear me all right? So, most of services in crypto, they focus on providing value in some way. What is the value add of, say, AI in crypto and agents in crypto? And at Hopscotch, we see it really as kind of like a time and money problem, like most problems in the world. And from the time side, it's, all right, now we've got things that can run 24/7. All right, they can run when we sleep, being kind of, all right, we can't monitor them 24/7, so this is a huge advantage from the standpoint of saving time. The second aspect is saving money. And so there's a bunch of fraud and scams in crypto, and it's something we all love to talk about, and hopefully it's kind of growing pains that we're moving past, but it's something that comes back every cycle as we build new things and kind of move into new technologies. And the third aspect is, so we've got kind of like saving time, saving money. The third aspect is making money, which is, I'd say, one of the biggest value adds of what brings people into crypto. If Bitcoin didn't go up so much, half of you probably wouldn't be in the room. And that's something that we need to realize that, when the number goes up, more people get interested, and it's a way of inviting people more into the space because it's, let's FOMO into the next kind of, like Dogecoin and Bonk and kind of meme coin. It gets people involved, right? It's a cheap way of getting interest. So it's like, all right, what does AI and crypto bring to the table? It's all right, it's saving time, it's saving money, and it's making money. That's kind of how we see from the agent side.
Great, thank you. Avaer, if you would like to comment on this from your background.
Sure. So I'm from Upstreet. We work on autonomous agents in the metaverse, kind of solving the last mile problem, giving users a really good interface into all of this new technology that a lot of people are working on these days. But kind of like starting off with a little bit of a parable. I'm really inspired by sci-fi, anime, and things like Neil Stephenson, Snow Crash, Diamond Age. So another thing that inspires me is like the Matrix, and for example, especially the Animatrix in the Second Renaissance, kind of prequel to the Matrix. The story there is like the AI gets really good, and then they decide to found their own nation state. It's very Balaji-esque, network state-ish. And basically the AIs found that nation state, and then they take over the world using market forces. Nobody can compete with them. And basically, I think crypto is a way for us to avoid the bad future where we kind of fight against the AIs, fight against these market forces, and it allows us to participate inside of these economies. So for example, you could give your AI agents wallets. You could have AI agents representing you inside the metaverse. There's actually a law now passed in Wisconsin that legitimizes this, where basically agents are given legal authority to act as principals on behalf of humans. And crypto is basically our safety blanket here. It allows us to say like, hey, we have a technology that allows transnational transactions completely free in a way that like nation states cannot prevent from happening. And so AI based, and basically crypto with AI allows us to kind of work towards a good future where the AI doesn't take over with market forces. It allows us to participate, it allows us to be friends with them, and kind of like end up in a good future.
Great, thank you. Oak, from Olas' perspective, how do you, because you follow this vision since a long time, right, that AI agents are powerful for crypto. What's your comment on it? Maybe turn it around. Why is crypto needed also for AI? How can we empower it from the other side?
So yeah, thanks. I'm Oak. I'm one of the co-founders of Valerie, and we have, of course, the one of the core developers of the Olas ecosystem. So for those who aren't familiar, Olas essentially can be boiled down to a protocol for generating autonomous agent economies. And I think the question of like why AI in crypto for me really comes down to like how do we really generate these autonomous agents and how do we build them such that they're truly autonomous. I think one of the big opportunities when it comes to agents, which I don't think is properly permeated yet, is just the sort of the scale of the thing. I think a lot of the time people talk about individual autonomous agents, but really when you can orchestrate agents at scale, not just to operate individually, but operate, as entire sort of like deliver services together, potentially come together to create entire industries and entire economies, then it's very credible to think that we have an entirely new economic paradigm on our hands. And the question of crypto plus like why crypto and AI is that you just can't do that without both crypto and AI. And yeah, we've sort of felt that from the beginning.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that we can empower each other, like both technologies. But Lex, a question to you, and you're doing deep research in this space, right? So you can maybe discuss on this question a bit more. What are we actually moving away from if AI agents will become crypto's largest user base in comparison to the human interaction that we have at the moment? And what kind of risks can actually come up with this as well?
Sounds great. This is like a bread loaf of crypto AI people. I feel sort of, it's like the Matrix cloning bat. You pick like the most dystopian scene from like the whole in the Matrix, where it's they're farming people for mitochondria.
Yeah, they basically turn people into batteries. But I think honestly, AI and crypto kind of prevents that bad future.
It's batteries that own themselves.
Yes.
That's a joke. Okay, so I think it's a really broad question, and I'm going to answer it by dodging through talking about the context. The internet is for robots, right? Like, do you guess how much internet traffic is robots? Less than 10%, raise your hands. Less than 20%, less than 30%, 40%, 50%. There we go. 50-60% of the internet is bots clicking ads. If we look at another venue, you look at the equity markets. How many orders do you think are placed by humans versus how many orders do you think are placed by robots? I'm not going to do a survey, but it's insane. It's like 80 to 90% is just poof, 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 robots trading in the markets. So, and what's a robot? The robot is just an extension. It's just a technology, so it's the extension of human intent. So I think it's not as binary as like, here's a person and then there's a car, and the two are totally different, except for, I guess, cyborgs that are bolted onto cars, which I shouldn't go into. With software is integrated into us all the time. So I think it's a spectrum of how automated our actions are. So if you look again at the context of social media, for example, most people who know how to play the algorithm, right? They generate content that's good for the robot, and then they get lots of exposure. And when you zoom out, what you realize is you're looking at a giant sort of machine intelligence tentacle octopus that is making people do things at a population scale, right? People aren't like making decisions to talk about particular things. They're playing into a giant math algorithm. at scale. And if you look at things like, God forbid, BLAST or EigenLayer or Blur, who here is in Pufferfi or Etherfi or any other liquid restaking token? One person, like me, is, thank you. We three will lose our money because we're so early. No? Okay. So again, what are people doing on Galaxy Quests? They're following the instructions laid out by machine rules, deterministic rules that David alluded to before. So we're already behaving in this highly sort of automated way on a population scale. I think once you introduce agents into it, you're extending the human capacity to function in a further, more automated way. And so, instead of the click farming that people are doing on blockchains to fake transactions, that doesn't have to be human labor. That can be automated labor. And so you're going to see, I think, the types of economic activities that are happening on chain today, you're just going to see them being done at scale by very specialized software. And so, for me, it's not a 0 to 1 transition. It's kind of a gradient that increases productivity. End of the day, I think it's a productivity increase and a GDP increase. And my hope is that AI brings more real economic activity to Web3 and pulls people out of having to do these weird mechanical Turk tasks, to participate in the algorithm on the other side.
Sounds very positive. Any risks that you can see with this as well?
None come to mind. It's more.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
What
Let's
about when
continue then. Go on.
agents discover restaking?
Yeah, so, I do think, I don't think you need agents to have like the DeFi rehypothecation failures that we've had. Like, people are perfectly capable of being complete idiots about that on their own. But I do think that the science fiction world of DAOs that are more autonomous, corporations that run themselves, that are able to out-execute people and create, black holes in financial markets and suck in resources. I definitely think that agents are a way for that to happen, where, again, they're an extension of somebody who's very skilled, and they can be used for good and evil. I mean, the other risk is spam, right? Like, who loves spam and robots on Twitter? It's not a great experience. So I think figuring out sufficient friction that the work of the agents is economically fruitful, rather than sort of just taking advantage of people's ignorance, I think is hard.
I think, so it's, yes, really super interesting, particularly numbers around like the number of bots that are out there currently. I think the biggest risk is like, who owns the incentives as autonomous agents get more powerful? Like today, who owns the incentives? It's the big, for example, social media players. The bots aren't just randomly running around doing stuff. They're doing stuff in order to, whatever, trick you or get you to click certain ads. And so I actually think that, if we continue as we are with the most powerful AI players being, centralized and not at our kind of behest, then I think what happens is that the situation just gets worse. Whereas if we move into a world where the incentives are, entirely programmable, and that autonomous agents can be directed towards really anything that we want, then, the world potentially looks quite a lot better.
Okay, Ethan, would like to hear your comment. Actually, back to the question that I asked before. Sure. Like, you're building an open ecosystem for AI native apps, right? Yeah. What do you see changing when we move away from the human interaction to the AI native?
Yeah, I think previously only programmers can write the code to create applications that can be interacted by other users. But nowadays, with all the generative AI technologies, it's relatively easy for non-technical background creators or founders to build applications without any coding, and with very interactive ways to generate images, to build all sorts of personalized applications. And with the external trigger, it's gonna be the starting point for the autonomous agent, because the agent can be triggered by maybe an email or maybe some on-chain event or on-chain transaction. So there are gonna be a lot of great applications gonna be built by more like great minds with a lower entry barrier. I think back to the question about the security, I think nowadays most of the agent or AI we are talking about refers to large language model. Large language model itself is basically a probabilistic model, so it's indeterministic, and also there's a lot of issue about hallucination and also the attacks to alternate the behavior of the model. I think if we are using a autonomous agent on chain for the trading and it can be easily manipulated in some random ways, it's going to be very dangerous. So I think with the blockchain and the crypto, people can collectively control how the AI agents works. That's going to be a way to deal with the hallucination or the indeterministic of nowadays AI.
Cool. Anyone else wants to comment? Morgan, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to, in terms of like the responses so far, and you guys are super smart. But when I look at like the world of hey, what do we have as major problems in the world, and how can this help solve them? One of those problems is trust. It's like it feels like as a society we can trust each other less and less and less. And what I don't know is if agents can help solve this in the sense of reputation. So in terms of history of myself, it's like 10 years ago. I built a Twitter bot over the weekend, 100,000 Twitter accounts, and used it to follow my brother for his birthday. And this aspect of like, hey, a reputation on Twitter, like on social media, it's kind of exactly your scenarios of, hey, there's just bots around the internet, right? How can this aspect of reputation make its way into agents and smart agents to kind of bring back this idea of trust? Like, can we get to a point where we can learn to trust an agent, and then maybe we can trust a group of agents or a group of agents that are paired with human beings? And is this kind of like a hybrid approach, or is this an all-in approach of, hey, I'm going to run this agent on chain that's maybe paired with maybe a group or a panel of individuals? That's kind of like things that come to mind after you guys started talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and I think crypto hasn't solved the reputation graph issue despite being able to solve the reputation graph issue, right? Like, we haven't even solved identity or like wallets or any persistent sort of for people, but a reputation graph with tokenomic incentives is definitely interesting. The question that I have also for the panel is, do you think that in a world where you do have lots and lots of agents doing stuff and going to Web3 market venues and calling on machine intelligence, is the machine intelligence like one large centralized provider? And I don't mean necessarily like it has to be OpenAI, it could be decentralized big machine intelligence network. Or do you see a world where each of the individual agents will sort of embed some version of local intelligence that they carry around?
Take a crack at it as much as not really.
Or like, what have we seen so far, I guess?
Well, just kind of going back to the AI technology stack, I think like the way that the human brain works and the way that the AI technology is evolving, I think it's going to be very sharded out in the sense of you have large language models, but you also have vision models, and like all these things are working together to create like new forms of life, essentially. I think basically AI agents allow for users to really finally take ownership of like these kinds of systems. So for example, you can basically have an AI agent that you give it some sort of incentive, you give it some crypto. It can work with other agents within a system, can work with other platforms. I mean, it's pretty easy to translate API calls. You have function calling with OpenAI. And so kind of like going back to your question, like, is this going to be centralized? I actually don't think so. So I think the way that humans interact with technology and interact with other humans is we're humanizing everything. We don't necessarily know how to interact with a huge system like ChatGPT or a super intelligence that's probably coming at some point. I think what it's going to look like is we're going to be talking to these agents and they're going to feel like humans. It's not going to feel like one centralized entity. It's going to be like we have relationships with these new forms of life that are not necessarily human, and they're communicating with other forms of life that aren't necessarily human, or they could be human. Technology is enabling all of that. And I think it's going to be much more distributed just because of the power of LLMs and the ability of LLMs to give users a universal interface into computing, into all these systems that they don't necessarily understand. It's really a literacy technology at the end of the day. It allows users to finally understand how they can interface with the rest of these systems. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be this centralized thing. It's going to be very humanized.
So I think, there have been a lot of decentralized AI events this week, and I think one theme which we've noticed is that there is a tendency to think of, AGI in particular, but just to kind of forecast out and see like one monolithic either agent or like one monolithic model, and it seems very, very unlikely. What is the kind of like, the way that I look at it is that, one of the most kind of intelligent and dynamic and sort of powerful forces that's ever existed is the global market economy, right? And I think that's much more what it's going to look like. It'll be like a massive evolution that we see in the way that the economy of the world works. And naturally, in the same way that the global economy isn't made up of like it's not one agent really. It's made up of like a ton of individuals working together in companies, institutions, groups, forming, delivering services, industries, and like it bubbles up. And so like it feels very unrealistic that there will ever be like one dominant either model or like agent or even like group of agents. It feels very, very unrealistic.
Yeah, Microsoft is also investing not only in OpenAI, of course, but Mistral as well. Mistral Large is funded by Microsoft at this point. So we're going to have open source models. Basically, this is all going to be diffused, I feel like. There's really no other way that it can go. And like the bleeding edge models, the bleeding edge LLMs like GPT 4.5 is really only like 6 months ahead of the leading open source models at this point. And that gap is kind of narrowing. This technology is kind of like, it feels like it's inevitable that it's going to be accessible by everybody. And once it's accessible by everybody on a transnational scale, when every country, everybody basically anywhere in the world has access to this technology, there's really no way that you can have a centralized power that can kind of govern it. I guess the only way is if there's some sort of GPU shortage, which there definitely is. Like we're struggling to get enough H100s on our end. But other than that, I think there's really no other future other than everything just kind of being accessible by everybody. I'm interested in how it's all going to play out.
Okay, so I hear more leaning towards the decentralized system, which definitely makes sense if you combine it with Web3. Let's talk a bit more about the impact or when this impact will happen. And Morgan, we talked about this a bit in the beginning when we prepared for this panel, the iPhone or the Apple moment, of AI agents in crypto. Super important. This means like when everyone gets, or when it actually gets adopted within crypto or the blockchain is super useful for the AI use cases. What kind of moment would this be for you or for all of you, of course? And if you can predict the future, when do you think this will happen?
That's a tough one. The iPhone moment for AI and crypto. That's a $1 trillion question. Yeah. It's tough. Like when you can launch an agent with a prompt from your phone that does whatever you want for under $20, that's pretty powerful. And I don't know, I think we're only 2, 3, 4 months away, maybe sooner than that in terms of like the speed of evolution here. I was trying to think through, all right, hey, what's the path here? How does it get there? And I think it might start with, all right, there's an agent for every dApp out there, every app. And then there's an agent for an aggregation of apps, so it can work with multiple different kind of apps at the same time. And then it's agent-to-agent communication. Now, those are 3 things. I don't know if they happen in that order, but they're definitely being expedited in parallel as fast as humanly possible, not just by our teams, but I think about teams really around the world. And then we look at it from the consumer side. Hey, how do we actually put this in the hands of everyday users? Meaning it's much more powerful in the hands of 1 billion people than it is in the hands of 10. And I don't think we even know what that looks like yet. But when we can put that level of power in the hands of an everyday user, I think we can do incredible things. Now, that can be from the positive side and the negative side. And we've got to stress as much as we can from the positive side. And that is an uphill battle, I think. But that is kind of, I think, what we're here to do.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think, as Morgan said, I think we'd be, it's extremely difficult to tell like what the exact form factor of something like that would be. But we, as David was alluding to in his keynote, we have very strong opinions about like, sort of like at the level of principles, like how different user experience is going to look in this next phase. Essentially, what I think it comes down to is, and actually a very concrete example, I met a project recently, and the way this app works, I saw it and I found it pretty mind-blowing. So how it works is that you essentially type into a journal, and in the background you have a personal local agent, which is essentially like piecing it apart, understanding your intents, just like understanding what you want, essentially. And what they're trying to do is make it so that once it's understood what you want and what you need, it'll just go off. It'll find that for you. So, for example, say you're feeling a bit poorly, you are writing about how you have a cold or like some specific symptoms or whatever. You won't need to think about like, okay, how do I go and like make myself feel better? Your agent in their architecture will go off, tap into this like massive network of agents in order to like pull back the sort of medication or whatever you need. And that I think is what the UX that we're moving towards looks like. I actually don't think it'll be as manual as that. I don't think it's going to be like you have to type into a journal or whatever. You're going to basically have a set of physical devices which you have on you. I'm wearing these Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and I think they're actually like potentially a good starting point for the form factor, where these things are just, well, they're not actually, but they could be kind of like watching continuously, understanding what you need, and obviously storing that data locally, and then kind of shaping the world around you in order to like push you towards what you want. So I think like, in terms of like the iPhone moment, I think there's probably a hardware component like that, something which something physical, which is in your surroundings, maybe on your body, and then also it's going to need to be like enabled by a very rich network of autonomous agents in the background.
Cool. Next, you want to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll comment. I think our space it's so exciting, but it's also really dangerous because it's kind of like it's got all these complicated technologies and puzzles, and it's sort of like it can quickly turn into a religion, and become a black hole for smart people to be like, this is so interesting. I'm so interested. Infrastructure, and like, but that's, I wear an investor hat now, so I'm looking at venture investments in early stage projects, and this is exactly my field that I'm interested in, where I want to put money to work. In part because I think we need to grow this field to be a counterbalance to the very obvious kind of custodial AI problems that are going to emerge. But like, we gotta, your question was, when is it going to be the iPhone moment for AI and crypto, not just AI, right? So we don't get to take credit for ChatGPT building GPTs and being useful agents, right? We don't get to take credit for Apple's spatial computing and so on, right? There's reasonable skepticism about what we bring to the equation. And in terms of market size, like the breakthrough, like think about how we're bounded. We're bounded by the market venue of crypto. So our AI stuff is all about what you can do, what the agents can do within the context of crypto venues and crypto markets. So if that's not interesting to the average person, the agents will very efficiently be doing things that are not interesting and not commercial, right? The other way to think about it is, are there things that crypto-enabled agents can do in the external economy that the Web 2 versions can't? That's the other path to go, right? So wallets, stablecoin payments, that kind of stuff. But I would advise people to be kind of really careful about the science fiction here, because what crypto brings is the economic and financial architecture to attach to AI. That's the only advantage, we've got, is the economic architecture to own the thing and put, have control of it and so on. The financial architecture to use like modern financial products instead of just Stripe. If we don't avail ourselves to that, or if we forget that that's our bound, we're going to fall into the cult. And for me as an investor, that's like my biggest fear, is that I'm like 5 years off, that this theme is right, but the commercial market, like not everyone is really focused on it. So those are the kinds of examples and cases I'd really love to see from this group.
Cool. Ethan, I think you can comment on this very well, right? How can we solve
sure.
these concerns that Lex just asked or raised?
I think there are two moments going to be very interesting, especially combine the AI and cryptos. I think crypto is very powerful in terms of the incentive, especially on a multi-party network or the ecosystem. I think we all saw the power of crypto incentive for the creator economy previously, is for the text, for the image, for the videos, but nowadays it's AI agent or the AI application creations. And the complexity behind the AI application nowadays is way complicated than the previous articles, videos or images, because there are models, there are data that train the models, there are creators that's using the models to build the applications. So the supply side of the AI application is way more complicated than previous creator economy. I think given the fiat system as the fiat incentive, it's going to be very hard to align the interest of all contributors all together. I think the flexibility of crypto incentives, especially the self-pricing of different AI assets for the models, for the data, and also applications, going to be like something that's happened in the DeFi summer because of the modularity, the self-pricing, and also composability. I think that's going to also happen in the AI assets or the AI content creations. I think that at that moment, once the crypto can really bootstrap and incentivize the good works for people contributing to the AI application creations, and we have a platform that can really leverage crypto to beat the usages and beat the content quality of the pure centralized ones, the original AI community starts gonna realize the power of crypto. I think the second interesting moment is that if everyone have AI agents that can really delegate some works for the humans that the agent serves to, like do the online shopping, to grab the information, and to exchange the values with external third party. I think it's not possible, or I just can find it hard to imagine a AI agent is using a his own banking account, or use the human's banking account to buy something online. But the cryptography signature and hashing is so AI or so computer native to for the authorization, for the payments. So I think that's when the AI's capabilities to under users' intention, and when all the data, the service availability online is getting more transparent and permissionless, I think at that moment, the AI community is going to start to realize crypto probably is the only way to go for a massive scale permissionless payment.
Great. Oh, yeah, you would like to comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really wanted to extend something that Ethan said, which I really agree with, which is that it is very difficult to, coordinate all the actors in that go into creating sophisticated autonomous agent systems. Like, you need to build these things that they're not super easy to build. You need to reliably operate them. You need and there needs to be sustainable support for them over time. And That's what we found with the prediction system that we've been building on Gnosis chain. What we found is that if you can get the right people and the agents ultimately working together, then it's explosive. And so, like, just to come back to the question of the panel around like whether or not agents can become crypto's largest user group, I think it's like, from at least from our perspective and from the work that we've been doing on Gnosis chain, we've seen 300,000 transactions from agents already. Like, it's over 10% of all of the safe transactions on Gnosis chain so far. Like, if you get the incentives right and you get the right people working together, then it feels very obvious to us that yes, autonomous agents can become crypto's largest user group.
You just mentioned it. Yeah, you want to comment, Mo?
Please.
You just mentioned it, if you bring the right people together. And it would lead me to maybe the final question of today, because we have amazing experts here from both sides, right? The Web3 side, but also the AI side here, also in the room today. What could we do? And I always like to ask, it's a very high level question again, and maybe you want to get also philosophical. What can we do collectively to actually create or make this whole process a bit faster to support the thesis that we just discussed today?
To support the thesis, you said?
Yeah. To make, yeah.
What I'm hearing so far in terms of to complement your question too is we have big problems between the digital world and the physical one. And if we don't stay relevant to the physical side, we might kind of lose the whole goal entirely. And one of the difficulties with AI agents and smart agents in general is that they can't get physical. They can't do real world commerce. They can't affect our daily lives really in person, right? It's a digital product. And being able to build solutions that can impact the fundamentals of our everyday being a really important goal that we should stay true to, and be able to bring it back to, all right, what does this make a difference for real world commerce mean for AI agents? Like, digitally, they can thrive, right? You can't do the same thing with a bank account, but physically, they're kind of useless, right? We need to be able to make sure we can bridge that gap as effectively as possible if we want this to be kind of a worldwide product, in terms of like the thesis of, all right, how can AI agents become the most popular mechanics of say, online digital commerce?
Oh, you're bringing a lot of these experts together today. Also, not only talking about it, what can we do from a technical implementation to push it forward?
So yeah, David touched on it right at the beginning, and it kind of comes to the core of why we thought an event like this was good. Agents have the ability to, consume basically. He had a slide with it, but like all of the infrastructure that I'm sure many folks here are developing and trying to build usage for, autonomous agents need them. They need knowledge graphs. They need payment solutions. They need indexes. They need RPCs. So I think, I think basically there are so many people that are incentivized to like get involved and start helping build out the autonomous agent tooling, and looking forward to speaking to everybody here about that later.
Lex, your point from an investor perspective, are you investing in all of these pieces that we discussed today, or you have one focus to push the thesis forward?
It's a good question. We're investing across the stack, so that means starting at the sufficiently performant blockchain protocol layer, right? Like which, if we're actually going to have millions of bots that are able to access intelligence and go to places that people care about, right? You need a performant enough stack underneath. We're interested in the deep inside quite a bit too. Certainly it's fashionable, but I think having the body and not just the mind, right? Having the hardware body and not just the mind avail itself to crypto incentives and the interoperability of those incentives between different networks. I mean, literally just being able to take the tokens of one thing and into another network is different than paying AWS and or some other GPU cloud provider. So we're looking across the deep end stack. And then we're trying to figure out what the packaging for machine intelligence is. Like, I'm a huge cheerleader for crypto to be able to do decentralized AI. I just have trouble getting to conviction around some, we have so many ideas, but their usage is so low, and even the Web 2 versions of these things are having trouble getting usage. So I'm really focused around demand for these solutions and who can figure out a go-to-market, and who's thinking about a go-to-market and not just how beautiful the complexity is. And then finally, once you have intelligence, the delivery and the ownership of that intelligence, the ownership by people that respects their dignity and doesn't take advantage of their data and so on, and then the delivery of these agents into things that people need in the physical or the digital world. So we're looking across all of that, and I think honestly the demand is a huge filter for us, and not necessarily like looking at demand today, but seeing that founders are obsessed with understanding the customer and kind of solving from where that sits.
Thank you. You're raising a lot of good questions today as well. I think this will be good for networking later on. Ava, I would like to hear your perspective from the gaming side, right? What do you think is needed in your area maybe, or what can we do collectively to push it forward?
So I think one of the biggest problems that crypto has had is kind of a friction for onboarding users. Part of that is because of like government regulation, KYC. Part of that is just because it's a complicated technology and it takes a long time to explain. So kind of going back to the iPhone moment, the way that Steve Jobs presented it was that it was an iPod plus a phone plus an internet communications device. And these are basically things that kind of don't exist now. They've been bundled into the iPhone now. But basically, technological evolution always works as basically a blockchain that runs on meat. We're always standing on the shoulders of giants, and we're always building on what came before. So I think what we're going to see with the adoption of AI in crypto, it's going to be an evolution of what we currently see. So I think what we need to be thinking about more is how can we build very humanistic interfaces on top of things? How can we use the modalities that we already interface with technology? How can we leverage AI to kind of supercharge that and build on top of what we have? So at Upstreet, what we're working on right now is basically a chat app where you can talk to AI agents. They have avatars, very humanized. And it feels like iMessage, it feels like FaceTime, it feels like the stuff that you're already using. It works on your phone. And that, I feel like, is the kind of onboarding that we need to get users to understand like the power of crypto. Like, hey, this is just like an AI agent. They're just like me. I can give them Ethereum. I can give them NFTs. They have wallets because we're using ERC 6551 token-bound accounts. So if we build our technology on top of the ways that users are currently interfacing with the things that they love, that's probably the path forward. And that kind of, I think that is how we can kind of solve a lot of these problems, especially around friction, onboarding, getting users to understand crypto, and just really giving users a really good interface into all this.
Perfect. And last word also from Ethan, following maybe on the questions that Ava just raised, which were very good. How are you maybe trying to solve these at MyShell?
Yeah, I think on the panel, you guys have brought out a few very interesting topics, especially on the real demand from the real usages. I mean, from the user side, if we are talking about the general audience, no one really care about whether it's like decentralized or centralized. People saw the content's value. What's the value you are providing to users? Entertainment values or efficiency or productivities. That's how the general audience saw this. And nowadays with the crypto or the blockchains, we have a lot of additional cost. Like we have to reach to a consensus. So we're gonna have a lot of redundancy of computation. We're gonna have a little bit of additional latencies. And also for the new user onboarding frictions, that's all the issues. I think it's the whole industry's mission to deal with. And I think making Web2 user easier to understand what's happening behind the scene for the encryptions, for the decentralization. I think hiding all the technical details and making it as smooth as possible, and to leverage the strengths of crypto for the ownership, for the incentive. I think that's probably going to be the way to go, to build something that's people love, not by speculation, but by the actual usage of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to close the panel discussion with this. Quick summary. I guess the iPhone moment is coming soon. Yeah, maybe there's some hardware involved. And we can use today's event to really network and see how we can push it forward to make AI crypto use cases coming very early. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you so much. Oh, there's a question. Maybe one question, if that's okay? Cool, go ahead.
So I'm going to throw a prediction market here. So just imagine every one of you have $1 million. So from 0 to 1 million, how much would you bet on the fact that in 3 years, OpenAI will open up verifiable function like AI detector, for people to verify what contents are coming from OpenAI Phala and not. How much money would you bet in and why? This is my question.
Maybe you want to repeat the question?
I feel like I might just go max leverage on whatever you think.
The question was, how much money would each of you bet if OpenAI will integrate verifiable functions? Open up the function, yeah, open sourcing. How open source will it be?
Maybe it's a better question of, what do we demand as users here? Because if everyone in this room said that's what we want, and we want to use models that provide that, I think OpenAI recognizes that they have an amazing distribution model. Distribution. What's the stat? 1 week time frame, 100 million users, something ridiculous, right? It's extraordinary what they've done, and so if their users demand that aspect is verifiable and open source, I imagine that's a flip of the switch. If they don't already have that kind of being ready and being prepared, I'd be surprised. So maybe, max long, 10x leverage, $1 million. Is that priced in dollars?
I think OpenAI is going to get beat up the way Zuckerberg got beat up on Libra. And so I think being in first place I'm sure I will be wrong on this, but my intuition says that thing is going to be so neutered and useless that what you're describing will actually come from somebody else. That I think OpenAI is just going to be too neutered.
It sounds like a big amount you're betting on this.
I guess on the opposite, right? I would bet on the opposite.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting question. I think we all saw what's happening with the deepfake, and all the social media has AI generated image detection, but that's easy because AI generated image has a certain pattern that's not visible. But for the generated text, this is a very tricky question because I think AI gonna generate indistinguishable text from human beings, and the text itself is not possible to add a invisible watermark around it. So every single generated content on the internet probably gonna come along with the proof, maybe ZK proof or some proof. But the tricky part is to generate the proof with the large language model inference. That's gonna be, nowadays, it's probably 5 magnitudes more expensive than the actual inference. So what's the use case or the scenarios that people willing to pay for generating the proof? I think making it detectable is something everyone want, but in practice, I don't find how it's gonna happen.
Happy with the answers?
Yeah, I just think because OpenAI is also facing into competition, and based on my personal proof with my friend, it's like people like dirty minds. We prefer to use the LLM that can't be verified. So when I post something on Twitter, I don't want my audience know it's coming. 60% of it is coming from AI. So this is my. I also have the concerns that we don't have strong demand for verifiable proof of the machine learning.
Great question, Marvin. We have more panel discussions where we can maybe dig deeper into this question. Thank you so much, and thank you guys again.